Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. I'm your host, Matt Hodkinson, and today I'm joined by Shawn Walsh, CEO of Encore Strategic Consulting, co-author of The Pumpkin Plan for Managed Service Providers, and a driving force behind smarter exits and more valuable businesses. We talk about how founder-led sales can actually hold you back, why peer groups outperform one-on-one consulting, and the real metric you should be obsessed with if you want to build a business that runs and grows without you. This one's packed with strategy, clarity, and straight talking leadership, so let's get straight into it. Welcome to the Consultancy Edge. Shawn Walsh, how are you, sir?
Good, Matt. How are you?
Yes, very well, thank you. I've been really looking forward to this session because of your story, and I do want to dive into the many aspects of what have brought you to this point. But before we do that, tell us about how you help businesses to profit, grow, and exit there at Encore Strategic.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. So we work with entrepreneurs to help them get past the hurdles and the roadblocks that entrepreneurs face as they grow and scale their companies. And we say profit, grow, exit in that order for a reason, because we want new businesses to dial in their profitability first and figure out how we're making money. Then we focus on growth, and we have the profit to be the oxygen to fuel that growth. And then we want to prepare for exit. And people get hung up on the exit part because they say, well, I'm not ready to exit. They say, that's great. That's the best time to prepare your business for exit. The reality is we all think we're going to choose a day when we're going to retire and leave our companies. And the reality is most of the time the day chooses us. And that can be good. In my case, we had a private equity firm come knocking on our door and made us an offer we couldn't say no to.
Wonderful.
In other cases, I've had clients come to me and say, I'm having a health crisis, or a family member is having a health crisis, and I have to sell. And the worst thing that I do in this job is have to tell somebody that in the midst of this crisis, what should be their most valuable asset isn't worth near what they think it's worth. And it's heartbreaking to have that conversation. And my goal at Encore is to never have that conversation again. So that's what we do for entrepreneurs. When we say exit, doesn't mean you have to exit. It means you get your parachute packed by the door and you can jump anytime you want. So, or anytime that life forces you to.
Yeah, and of course, I think in one of our previous calls, we discussed one of my favorite books that's possibly the most well-thumbed in my business library, which is Built to Sell by John Warrillow. I think you mentioned that you had a meeting of minds with that particular author, and I think it's a great way to be, isn't it? Whether you intend on exiting, whether it's in your immediate future, it's just a great way to build a business, right?
Absolutely. You have to have your business in the best possible condition to sell at any given point, because you, like you say, you never know when life's going to throw you a curveball. And John Warrillow's book, Built to Sell, we use that as a coaching tool. And I met John a few months ago, and I was lucky enough to get to a dinner we were attending together, and I was one of the first people. So I had him alone in the bar for a minute, and I said, I owe you a debt of thank you. I said I wouldn't be here, and I would never have exited as well as I did had I not had your advice. So we try to build on that, and I try to take the work that John did and people like Mike McAllowitz have done. And I'm building on that because those guys helped me, and now it's my turn to help others.
Wonderful. And you and I have spoken about, of course, I know that you work with a lot of technology-focused businesses. We've done work with a number of different flavors of consultancy. It seems to be that in those types of advisory, expert-led businesses, that it's difficult for them to really step back, that they're still doing too much, they're wearing too many hats. Is that what you're seeing as well there, Shawn?
Absolutely. And I refer to this with entrepreneurs as the double-edged sword of entrepreneurship. We get to a point of success because we can do everything in our business. We can go out, we can make the sale, and then we can deliver the service, and then we can do the follow-up, and then we can go out and do it again, and we can send the bill, and we can do the accounting. And that allows us to get to a level of success where many people make a really nice living. And then we decide we want to start expanding our businesses and we start hiring people. The problem is is we got here because we were able to do everything in the business, but now we get stuck here because we continue to do everything in the business. And when we get to a certain point, the hard part is now we have to give away those hats and we have to step back and we have to let other people do it. And it's not always exactly the way that we would do it. And I have entrepreneurs who complain all the time. Well, yeah, I can't give that job to somebody else because they'll never do it the way I do. And my response to them is, they might do it better. And that's, as an entrepreneur, we tend to be a bit of control freaks. So we have a hard time with that. And I tell people the hardest thing I had to learn how to do leading a team was to keep my mouth shut in a meeting. And to the point where sometimes I would say, hey, team, I want a solution to this problem. And I would walk out for 20 minutes because if I was there, I'd be running my mouth. And as the leader and as the owner, we always want to speak last because we don't want to be influencing the great brainstorming of our team. But that's a hard thing to learn when you've come up by your bootstraps and you've got your baby here that you've built. But you have to learn to do it if you want to grow. And that's the next phase.
And Shawn, when we talk about all those hats that we have to wear as business owners and those that we're perhaps unwilling to relinquish, do you see any trends in terms of which of those hats you recommend that people focus on first? What should they be delegating? What should they be passing off, getting off of their plate?
Yeah, so typically what we recommend is the first hires that an entrepreneur should be making in their company is somebody else to deliver the services. Somebody who works directly with the clients. And this is where we stress to people, you have to be creating documented, repeatable process. The biggest complaint in handing off the work to somebody else is they won't do it as good as I do. They won't treat the customer. The customer won't have the same experience. If you have a documented, repeatable process and you train somebody to that process and they're able to follow it, the client will have a consistent experience. Companies like McDonald's, I mean, you can go to McDonald's anywhere in the world and you're going to get the same hamburger for the most part because they have a process. And that's a simplified answer, but it really goes even for higher and more technical things. So when I'm working with somebody who's a solopreneur and they're thinking about expanding, and I will ask them, do you have the documented processes? And they'll say, no, I don't need it. It's just me. Well, that's great. Now it's not going to be just you. And the problem is, if you don't document it now, when you hire people and you start needing it, you're not going to have time to do it. So one of the first things we work with entrepreneurs to do is to document the key processes in the company so that they can then start handing it off to other people with consistent results. And that's the key. And the lack of consistency is the big reason that everybody gives not to hand the hat off. But if you built the process, then you can do that and you can do it with certainty that things are going to happen the way you want them to.
Yeah, wonderful. And then those processes can, of course, they can evolve, they can improve over time. That's part of the process.
Reviewing the processes regularly absolutely is part of the process. The processes that work for you at $1 million in revenue will start breaking at $2 and $3 million of revenue. So you have to build into your process a regular evaluation and review of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know this in growth systems like marketing and sales that things change, that the same tactics, the same strategies that worked even 6 months ago, sometimes they can change dramatically, can't they?
One of the things that entrepreneurs don't think about because we're so goal driven, we just want to go forward, is sometimes we have to stop and look around and ask questions. And L. David Marquet in the book Leadership as Language spelled this out in a beautiful process where we define the doing work of following the process. That's red work, right? That's the get the work done, follow the process. Let's see what happens at the end. And we have to have that process, that type of work. But we also have to have what he refers to as blue work. And this is thinking work. This is analysis work. And what we fail to insert blue work often enough into the red work. And we need to be setting up breaks where we can do the work for a while. Then we need to stop gather as a team and go, okay, team, did we learn anything? Do we need to change anything? Are we ready to move forward to the next part? And if we insert these regular stops of blue work to stop and think and question, did this go the way we expected? Did we get the results that we wanted to get? Do we need to change anything going forward? Is there new information that we've gotten in doing the red work that we need to consider for the next phase of red work? So by doing these inserts and having these pauses, we get much better results instead of just plowing ahead. Because plowing ahead 100 miles an hour only helps if you're absolutely certain you're going in the right direction, and things change all the time.
Yeah, you need to course correct for sure. Shawn, I know that you were a cop in a previous life.
I was.
You surely know how to sniff out the BS out there. So when you walk into a business now as a growth consultant, what's the first smell of trouble that tells you that this team is not aligned and that the leaders don't know it yet?
Yep. One of the things that I like to do, and being the old detective, I like to go and investigate in person. I don't take people's, trust but verify. So you can tell me how great your culture is and how well your business runs, but sometimes the owner is the last one to realize where the problems are. So I like to come in person, and I will fly out to a client and I will meet with the team initially. I want to speak with the team members one-on-one. And one of the questions that I typically ask them is, can you tell me exactly what you're responsible for, how it is measured, and how do you know when you've won? So do they have clear objectives? Are there objective measurements of that? And do they know what it is? And do they know when they've crossed the finish line on that objective? And typically, the answer is, I get ums and ahs, and it's kind of about this or about that. And that's usually my first clue that we need clarity. And lack of clarity is a very common problem in an entrepreneurial business, because again, as the owner, we're thinking, well, it's in my head. Why I came to this conclusion looking at this. Why aren't they coming to the same conclusion?
Yeah.
So, and we have to remember they're not. And as entrepreneurs and as owners, we under communicate. I remember one time my wife coming into my office and closing the door, and she said, there's no doubt in my mind you have an amazing vision for this company. And she said, the problem is nobody out there knows what it is. And I was shocked. I was like, really? I mean, I just thought they knew what we were going for. And, I think I replied, well, I think I've told them before. The problem, we need to communicate to our teams on a regular basis what their role is, what their expectation is, where we're heading as a company, what is the goal. And you will be amazed at, once they realize there's a goal, how much your team will jump on board with getting there. Unfortunately, most employees at most entrepreneurial businesses, if you ask them, for them, it feels like Groundhog Day. They're coming in, they're doing a job, they don't know why, they're going in circles. It's just, they wake up the next morning and the same thing happens. They don't know the why. And we think we've shared it, but we haven't shared it enough. So we have to constantly be telling our team, where are we at? Where are we going? We're going there together. What is each of your role? How does your role affect the big picture? They need to know this. They need that level of clarity, and that's often missing.
Yeah, that is true leadership, isn't it? And reflecting on that as well. I know that you wrote an article called "Hire Slow, Fire Fast is Dead."
Yeah.
Was that an effort to create a bit of controversy, perhaps a bit of clickbait when you wrote that, or is it time that we all admit that this mantra is a lazy excuse for poor leadership?
Absolutely. When I sold my company, one of the things that we had to do was to go through all the old personnel files that we had saved over the years. And we had to decide which ones to shred and which ones had to be boxed up and kept and shipped down to the new owner. And it was a agonizing experience. I mean, there were some, we're pulling up some folders and going, oh, remember this person, and laughing. But there were so many of them that I remember firing or leaving and thinking, they weren't any good at their job anyhow. And now at this stage of the game, I'm looking at that person's folder, realizing they weren't the problem. I was. It was
Right.
me. I failed because I set them up for failure because I wasn't giving them clarity on what their job was and what my expectations were. I just assumed they knew it by osmosis. And when they failed, well, you're not good at your job. You go. So the hire quickly, fire slowly addresses two things. The hire quickly is that the job market is tight right now. When you are out there looking for new employees, you better know exactly what you're hiring them for. You need to know exactly what the path is for them in your company. When you make the job offer, you better be able to lay out to that person, you're coming in here, but here's all the other opportunities that you have here that you can work towards. You can choose a management track. You can choose a technical track. You could choose a sales and customer service track. Because when I was young and you got a job, you said thank you and you did exactly what you were told because the person offering you the job felt that they were giving you something of value and you should be thankful. That doesn't work anymore. When you're making somebody a job offer in this day and age, you better go into sales mode and explain to them why this is the right place for them, why they're going to have an awesome experience working here, and you have to show them what the path is. Mm. I hear so many business owners complain, oh, this generation, and you can put in Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, whatever moniker people are complaining about in this day and age. And it's BS. I have hired people from every generation. There are slackers in every generation, and there are amazing, driven people who want to succeed in every generation. But everybody says, well, Gen X, or Gen Z, they want to be CEO on day one. And I correct them and say, it's not that they want to be CEO on day one, but they do want to know what the path is to CEO on day one. So people don't want to just work for a paycheck. They want to work for a cause. They want to work for a purpose. So you be prepared to lay that out. You need to hire quickly. The fire slowly part is that oftentimes as leaders, when the person is failing in the position, we fail to look in the mirror first. And the first question we need to be asking before we go and blame them and point the finger at them is, did we set them up for success? Okay, as a leader, there's three things that you need to do. You need to define what is the goal, where are we going, and you need to share that with everybody. Okay, number two, you got to make sure that you're hiring competent people. That's your hiring process. Okay, one of the mistakes we make as entrepreneurs is we hire smart people to solve interesting problems, but then we tell them exactly what to do and how to do it, which doesn't work. So we need to hire those smart people. And then we need to make sure they have all the resources to do their job. So clarity on the goal, making sure you got the right people on the bus, and then you got to give them the resources. And the fourth thing that I add to this, which is, that I add to this list, is get the hell out of their way and let them do their job. Yeah. So when we put somebody in a position, if they're not doing well, we need to first look at ourselves, ask the question, did we set them up for success? The second thing that we do wrong is oftentimes when we go to them, we start blaming them. You did this wrong. It's a personal attack. You're not doing well. And one thing that we need to remember is we don't fix people. That's not the job we're in. But we do fix processes. And can we attack the process without attacking the person? Why did they fail? What was broken in the process that led them down that road? And if we take it from that standpoint, it's not only going to be a much more constructive conversation, but instead of them standing there thinking they're getting beat up and that we're giving them a hard time, they're going to join in and help solve the problem. They're going to know, yeah, this step in the process, this is where I went down that road. And maybe if we had put this check and balance here, that wouldn't have happened. And now you're getting buy-in.
Yeah.
And now you're doing real problem solving.
Yeah, and you're giving ownership as well, aren't you? That, people are starting to take
Absolutely.
responsibility in a big way. Um, Shawn, your consultancy leverages peer groups. How do they function, and what makes them more effective in your minds than traditional one-on-one consulting?
Some are more effective than others. And I often tell people every business owner should be in a peer group. You don't have to join mine, but join a peer group. And they're all a little bit different. I think one of the key things that makes our peer group successful for business owners is that we tier them by business maturity. So we look at how is the business operating. For example, the owner. Is the owner involved in every decision, or does the owner have a team and they've delegated those things too? Those are two very different levels of business maturity. And maturity is not revenue. I've seen $10 million companies that operate like $1 million companies, and vice versa. So it's more than revenue. It's your day-to-day operations. It's the things that are in the way. It's how you deal with your team, how you deal with your clients. Mm. So we tier the peer groups by operational maturity. So you're in with like people. The companies that you're in the group with are having the same types of issues that you're at, because you're at the same plateau in your journey. The other thing we do is we use financial data from each of the companies, and we have a series of metrics that we look at based on percentage of revenue. Mm-hmm. So that normalizes the data. If we have a company that's $1 million in revenue, one at two, we can compare the metrics side by side without it being skewed because of the volume. So, and then what we do is we look at the company against an industry benchmark, and then also against themselves over the past 6 quarters. And then we also compare the group members against one another. So Matt, let's say you were in the group, and we go, hey, Matt, you're having a real problem on service gross profitability. But Joe over here is really crushing that number. Joe, what advice do you have for Matt? This is where the power of the group comes together. Everybody's got different strengths. In the group, everybody is non-competing. One of the things we make sure of before we bring a new member in, we go to the existing membership, make sure that this person is not a competitor to anybody in the group, or make sure it's not somebody that they know and have a problem with. The key to this group working is that, to steal a term from the title of Patrick Lencioni's great book, Getting Naked. You've got to get naked in front of this group. You've got to bare your soul here. And we don't want anybody in the group that's going to cause somebody else to not be wanting to share. So we have to have a group where you're comfortable putting everything on the table. But this group then acts as your board of directors, and it acts as a board of advisors. This is where you come and bounce things off of. When you have a problem, you have a whole team of other business owners to give you advice. I mean, our email threads go constantly in between meetings with people saying, oh my gosh, this came up today. Has anybody run into this problem? Can anybody help me? And all of a sudden they have 10 responses. Yep, been there, done that. Here's how I fixed it. Here's how I fixed it. That's incredibly valuable. But the thing that really makes the groups valuable, that I think, is when you get up there and everybody gets a turn doing a company presentation. And this is where you talk about, where did you come from? Where are you now? And where do you want to go? Where are the problems? And the other business owners are analyzing the business, and they're filling out a SWOT analysis and giving you feedback. Some of those presentations, Matt, have been unbelievably emotional. We've had people break down in tears. We've had people get mad and yell. It's very, very emotional. But those presentations had led to transformations that would blow your mind. I have a good friend and client right now. One year he did a presentation, and he jokingly refers to it as the great ass kicking of 2012. He said, I never got past slide 2, and they were ripping me to shreds. But he went back and made changes in his company, and he's got a company now that operates at over 20 20% EBITDA and grows 20% every year. They're over 10 million in revenue. They have an amazing team. They have an amazing company culture. And that is not the company that he presented, 14 years ago at that meeting. And that is the real power of this group. We had one person that was in tears because they didn't know how they were going to pay their employees the next week. And one of the group members who I had only recently met, and I thought, my initial impression was this guy's kind of a jerk. And all of a sudden he stood up and he said to that guy, he said, "What are you doing Tuesday?" The guy's like, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "I am flying down to your office." Now, these guys are across the country from one another. He goes, "I am flying to your office on Tuesday." He goes, "I have just cleared out my schedule and I am not leaving till we have your books straightened out. We have your receivables straightened out and we have your cash flow going so that you can run that business properly." And he did that. And I was like, okay, I guess I got to reevaluate this guy. and today, this person is a good friend, and we actually use him as a mentor for other business owners. And it's amazing, but that level of support system and helping you get past your own roadblocks and the things that are in your own head, that group is amazing for that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think too many business owners, and certainly a lot of the ones that I work with, are a bit insular when it comes to their business and of sharing and being vulnerable and focusing on the numbers and and bringing all of that to light, because it can feel like failure sometimes. I know, and people do take it very personally, and I guess that's why people get emotional about it. But I've been a part of those kind of peer groups before now, and have seen similar benefit from them. I know that that's a fantastically effective way to go. And whilst we talk about the metrics there, Shawn, I did want to just ask you, can you tell me, in your mind, what is the most underrated business metric? And then to bolt onto that, what do you think is the most overrated business metric that people need to kind of steer clear of?
Well, I mean, hands down, the most overrated one is top line revenue, because everybody goes, "Oh, I'm a $10 million company." I'm like, but you're only keeping 2% of it. It doesn't matter what you bring in; it only matters what you keep. So, I think that absolutely top line revenue is the most overrated. It means nothing. It's top line for vanity, bottom line for sanity. So, but the most underrated is really gross profit, especially in a service business, your service gross profit, because it really tells you, have you priced your services correctly, and are you delivering them efficiently? And that is really the key number. And if you can hit the gross profit target, I can fix everything else very easily. Fixing the gross profit is more difficult. And I think it was an interview I saw with, I think it was Charlie Munger. It was one of the big private equity companies. And the person said, "I don't care about EBITDA." He goes, "You can fake EBITDA." He goes, I can put all kinds of money into sales and drive money to the bottom line." He goes, "I can fudge top line revenue." He goes, you cannot fudge gross profit. Gross profit." He goes, "When I'm looking to buy a business, that's the first number I look at." And most business owners, surprisingly, really don't even know how to calculate it correctly when we first come in. So that's one of the first things we look at, and it gives us a lot of insight into where we need to start fixing stuff. Yeah. And so that would be I think that's the first key metric that we're going to look at.
Yeah, wonderful. That reaffirms actually the advice we've seen elsewhere from the people like Peter Chapp at the Wow Company presents the consultancy bench press report every year, and he really does sing the praises of that gross profit number and the importance of calculating that. And while we talk about growth in general, Shawn, what's one perhaps overhyped strategy that you wish people would stop chasing, and what should they do instead?
So one of the things that I see with entrepreneurs when they start getting to about the $2 million mark in most service companies, and I'm using a number that I see often in IT services, but applies across the board. they get to that point with owner-led sales. And now they're pretty much going to plateau there if they don't start building a sales team. And the first thing that every owner wants to do is to hire a salesperson, and then they bring that salesperson in. And I used to joke that the last thing they ever sell is you. And because you hire them and you don't have any idea how to manage a salesperson. And you think, like other positions, well, I'm hiring a professional. They know their job. They're the salesperson. They know how to sell. And we just put them out there. And then 6 to 9 months later, we're sitting there, we've paid out all the salary, and they're not doing anything. And the reality is you are not ready to hire a salesperson until you're ready to manage a salesperson. And most entrepreneurs are going to have a very hard time managing a salesperson. The thing that they overlook is that the position they should be filling is not a salesperson, but an account manager. Because they have a client base now. They have a solid client base. And chances are there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in that client base that nobody's gone out and harvested. And when you hire an account manager, it should be somebody who acts as an advocate for the client. The client should not see them as a salesperson or as part of the sales team. They should see them as the person who they can go to when things aren't going right with your services, and that you can go back and advocate on their behalf and fix things. It's also the person who's looking out for them, meeting with them regularly, going, okay, let's talk about the budget for next year. Let's talk about what are the projects that we're going to schedule. How would you like to break those out? So now the account manager is making sure all this extra work is getting done, that at this point, we're forgetting to go and even ask the client for that work. So the account managers pay for themselves so much faster. They generate more work within your existing client base who you already know and you enjoy working with if you've selected your clients correctly. Yeah. So at that point, you start managing them. And after you have that account manager in place, now you as the owner is freed up to do more owner-led sales. So that increases. I have actually seen a company go from 2 million to 12 million without hiring any salespeople, just by hiring good account managers. Now that's kind of an anomaly, but it really, people need to focus on managing the clients that they have very, very well before they worry about going out and getting a salesperson.
Right. I love that. And yeah, I mean, we've seen this before where sometimes we take our eye off the ball of those existing clients. So we know that to generate new business from your existing clients costs something like 6 or 7 times less than to get net new. And yet so many business owners are focused on that net new approach. How can we fix our marketing, our lead generation, and without looking in their own backyard first? So I love that account manager role, the importance of it.
Yeah. And the problem is we start bringing new revenue in the front door, but we're losing the old revenue out the back door, and nobody's working on closing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So easy to do. Shawn, I just want to check in on this one finally. What emerging trends do you foresee having the most significant impact on the consultancy, the expertise sector in the next 5 years or so?
I know this is going to sound like I'm jumping on the bandwagon here, but the reality is AI, because it's speeding everything up. And a great meme I saw was, you're not going to be replaced by AI, but you might be replaced by somebody using AI. Yeah. And that's what you need to do. My team, I wound up buying it as part of our Microsoft subscription, and it was kind of killing me for the cost of it. And I thought, what are we going to do with this? And all of a sudden my team starts pulling up this stuff going, hey, I was able to do this so much faster. I was able to, and it looks better and it's cleaner. And it's not replacing the work we do, it's accelerating the work we do. And if you don't learn to leverage that, you're going to be the person who drops off at the next phase. As businesses mature, as industries mature, and I saw this in the IT space. When I started in the IT space, we used to make 60, 70 points selling a box. We didn't charge for services because we were making so much money on the equipment. We gave the services for free. Yeah. Well, all of a sudden, we lost the margin on that. We had to switch to services. There were people who weren't able to switch from selling product to selling service, and they disappeared. And then we moved on. And then we got to where we became managed service providers, and we had to start thinking more proactively. There were people who couldn't make that shift, and they dropped off. Then we have the security side where security is so important. And there's people who are dropping off because they can't make that shift. And the same thing with AI. The people who don't adopt AI and accelerate their processes and accelerate their ability to do business with it are going to drop off.
Yeah, absolutely. Shawn, thank you for that. We've come to the point in the podcast where I give you our quick fire round: snog, marry, avoid. And it's not what you're thinking. The snog is a quick win in business. What would you advocate is a quick win that our listeners can take away today?
1%. Can you go out and raise your price by 1%? Everybody screams that we can't raise our price. Okay, but could you go out and raise your price today by 1%? Then can you look at your expenses and lower them 1%?
Love
and
that.
can you do that every week for the next 6 months? But just chip away one day at a time. What's one expense we can cut or reduce? What can we charge a little bit more for? And before you know it, you're making best in class profit.
Love that. Just increasing that profit gap. I love it. So the marry is something that you would install in your business for the long term. What is something you absolutely couldn't live without in business, Shawn?
My team. You need to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you are, yeah. And you need to know how to manage them and leverage them. And when you get a team that is not afraid to speak up and says, you know what, boss, I think you're wrong, and I think there's a better way to do this. When you can have that kind of constructive discourse amongst the team, it's like rocket fuel.
Yeah, I've definitely got enough of that in mind. Lastly, the avoid. What would you advocate that people ditch right now that's not serving them in their business?
Outsourced marketing, outsourced lead gen. I did a podcast. I see so many people they're not comfortable doing lead gen and doing marketing and well, I'm sorry, not the marketing piece, more the lead gen piece. And they look for magic bullets. Yeah. And the IT industry is full of people selling magic bullets, and people are buying them all the time. And they constantly, I've never seen anybody who actually got an ROI on it. I say that outsourcing your lead gen is like asking a stranger to go up to somebody and ask them to go on a blind date with you. It doesn't work, and it's kind of creepy.
Great advice. Shawn, thank you so much for sharing so much with us today. I think we've had so many golden nuggets in that conversation. Thank you so much for joining us on the Consultancy Edge.
Matt, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.